you for coming. This is Parent Learning Hour through Stone Soup Group and Fairbanks School District. My name is Anna Zierfuss, and my fantastic co-presenter today is Lisa Kozarik. We're going to be talking today about the secondary transition process and kind of what that looks like and how it works. So, what is secondary transition? It is basically a results-oriented process that focuses on improving both academics and functional performance of a kiddo and facilitates their movement from school to post-school goals. We are going to break all of this down into 4 different areas for you, and those include the legal stuff, of which there's always legal stuff, the actual process and what it looks like, including the paperwork, kind of the IEP components, and that's when we get into the paperwork. And then we have an entire slew of resources that you can use either before, during, or after this process.
So there were many changes in 1997 in the amendments to IDEA. Several actions of regulations pertain to the transition of students from school to adult life. So every student is required to have on the IEP following the following transition activities. So we want instruction, related services, community experiences, development of employment, post-school adult living activities. There are a couple others that you can also go ahead and consider, which are daily living skills and a functional vocational evaluation if the team determines that would be useful. The outcome for each students are individualized to meet that student's needs and to help propel them to their post-secondary goals. Alaska is an employment first state, so that is why the regulation on the screen focuses on this area. So it says a school district's primary objective and preferred outcome is to help the child become gainfully employed in an integrated workplace where individuals with disabilities work with and alongside of individuals without disabilities, or become enrolled in a post-secondary education. Some of the other legal stuff in Alaska, planning begins prior to a student's 16th birthday. It can begin sooner, but it must be in place by the time they're 16. And transfer of rights must be provided no later than their 17th birthday. So this is under IDEA law, all educational rights turn over to the student at 18 years of age unless there is a guardianship in place. And it must be documented in the IEP, and the court documents must be submitted to the school district. It is very important, and I see this all the time in our school district. Parents think that they have plenty of time to make that happen, or it'll be okay if they don't get it. And it really causes huge amounts of problems for the kiddo. It doesn't matter what level of cognitive ability the child is when they turn 18, they are their own guardian unless there is another guardianship in place. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through.
So this is a video that just talks a little bit more about how to put together the IEP transition plan and make it successful.
It's important to start talking with children early about what transition after high school is going to look like. But the transition plan itself must be in place at the age of 16 in the IEP. They should include post-secondary goals as well as transition services. So those post-secondary goals should be very specific, not vague aspirational goals, but very concrete steps that you expect your child to take after high school. It is so important that they have particular steps that they're going to take. What types of services? Do they need to visit college campuses? Do they need to be familiar with how to navigate in the community, how to self-advocate, how to ask for the services that they need? The transition plan should include realistic but achievable goals. For example, some students might say, I want to play in the NBA after I graduate from high school and they're not playing basketball in high school. That would be an aspirational goal, but one that's not very realistic. But a realistic goal would be to attend community college to get a technical degree, or to go work in supported employment in a veterinary clinic if that student is really interested in animals. If it's not realistic to expect that a student is going to be in the tiny percentage of those who get to play in the NBA, but the student really loves basketball, then they might be able to work as maybe volunteer initially as a manager on a college sports team or a local sports team, or go to community college and get a degree in something related to athletics, like athletic training or something like that. So there are a lot of ways that they could work either as a volunteer or eventually in paid employment in a field in which they're particularly interested. Parents know their children better than anyone. So you know the conversations that you've had, you know what your child is interested in, and you can share that with the IEP team. You can talk about the things that you know your child wants to do. And of course, the child should be a part of the process as well. They should be attending the IEP meeting and adding their thoughts and opinions and feelings about what they want to be doing after high school. But the parents really are an important participant in that process because, again, they know the child better than anyone and have shared in helping create the dreams and the vision that the child has for the future.
There are things to keep in mind as you go through the process. There are, of course, the idea requirements that we just talked about. The students' wants, needs, and goals, like the video talked about. Any assessments, so, statewide assessments, interest inventories, anything like that. Making sure that you're covering all the transition services and that you have that transfer of rights in place and in mind as you work through it. So some pre-planning suggestions.
So before the meeting, so prior, you want to look at needs, interests, preferences, and desires. So you are going to look at some person-centered planning, some informal surveys or discussions with the student, possibly some sort of transition camp if that's available in your area. There's the Alaska Career Inventory System, which is a fabulous way to do it. Occupational Outlook exists, and so does Alaska Career Ready. Some of our counseling departments in the high schools often do career inventory assessments in the student's sophomore year. So that information should be included if available, or at least considered when looking at the student's needs and interests and preferences as well. So participant-wise, you have your typical IEP team, so parent, not less than one general education teacher, not less than one special education teacher, a student, and a district representative, as well as any other staff that are needed or required for the kids program. Those all may be invited. Outside agencies are with written consent from a parent, so they may be with written consent prior to the meeting. Although, keep in mind, if a parent chooses to bring an outside agency with them directly to the meeting, that is fine. There is no invitation or consent needed at that point. So this is what a secondary transition page of an IEP looks like for many of us in the state of Alaska. Many people are using the same system at this point. Do know that the forms can vary, but this is what most of us will see. It includes student response at the top, a checklist to help the team plan, a course of study your student will follow, and some specific activities to help achieve those secondary transition goals. So the first part of the transition plan is student information. This is my favorite part of the transition plan to gather information for. There are three statements that the students need to complete. So they are: when I leave high school, I'll be employed as; when I leave high school, I will live; and when I leave high school, I will continue learning or training by. For these questions, students should be walked through a series of questions from the case manager that allows them to determine which careers they may be interested in. Again, as they had said in the video, you need to focus in on things that are realistic and attainable for the student. So if you want to be a NASCAR driver, maybe we're looking at working in a garage or doing some mechanics pieces or detailing or something of the sort. So we're around those cars. We might not quite get to the NASCAR level, but we're still doing something we're interested in. For all of these in lower functioning students, these questions can be done with a series of career cards, living cards, and learning cards that are available. And students can go through and pick what they are interested in. Um, for the checklist, examples of agencies present can be outside service providers, maybe ABA providers that know a student very well, or possibly DVR or TVR, so Division of Voc Rehab or Tribal Voc Rehab. Students should complete a transition assessment with the case manager prior to the plan being written. There are, again, many different assessments that can be done. Some of them are more formal than others, but they can be completed to get the information that's appropriate for your student at their level. All activities written into the plan should focus on allowing the students to succeed both academically and later on in life. And that's with employment and daily living skills if necessary. And any outside agencies, again, need to be invited by the parent in order to participate. The schools cannot invite them for you without written permission by you to do so. We have a few more examples of some of the other categories. So we have instruction, and so those might be in areas of reading or writing or math, whatever is wherever your student needs instruction in. They can receive related services in whatever areas are qualified for normally. Communication, they can participate, in related field trips, various community outings, including but not limited to grocery stores, whatever you're doing in your community. When it comes down to employment, whatever they need to participate in employment. So whatever class activities might be around, if there's daily living skill things that might lead to a job. Again, if you're going to work detailing cars, you might need to learn how to fold the towels that you're going to keep at your workstation. So this could be looking up websites for employment, visiting college campuses, visiting school and counseling offices, developing different job skills, whatever is appropriate for the level of your student. Adult living is normally things that are in those independent living skills that'll transfer to those post-school activities. If you do daily living skills and that is necessary, those can be all kinds of things. But that can be everything from practicing hygiene to um, exploring what leisure activities are available in your community. There's a large range of things that you can do there. And again, the vocational evaluation, if you decide that's something you want the student to participate, it's normally functional vocational assessment of some sort to participate in whatever class or vocational activities might push or increase their post-secondary employment. All of these, there are so many different things that can go in here. Please be aware every student is super different. We're going to give you some resources at the end where you can look and see what might be available or pertain to your student. These are very, very individualized. So please keep that in mind as you go through the transition process.
So we're moving right into the resources. So this one in particular is pretty fantastic. It was actually created here in Alaska, and it's called Picture Your Future. And it is basically an exploration book that you can actually sit down with the student as a teacher, or you can do it as a parent and go through and talk about what is career, what is work, what does training and education look like, what are the different things you might be interested in, what are the different supports you might be needing to get through. So this one is a really, really cool one. And it is actually on the DVR website as well, because it was created through them. And then the next one is actually also when Lisa was talking about like some of the, transition camps and stuff like that. Those can also be run through the DVR's pre-employment transition services. And so a lot of these different opportunities, especially in the more urban areas, you have a lot more access to these than you do when you're living in one of the rural areas. But it just kind of depends on where you're at and what your local DVR or TVR counselor has set up, or maybe there's a school or a teacher that might be interested in helping set one of these up. These are things that you can talk to them about. One of the big resources that we have in Alaska is this. It is the Pathway to Adulthood and Employment Transition Handbook. Now, this handbook is like 79 pages and it is dense. It is packed full of all kinds of good stuff. It was put out by the Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education here in Alaska. It is based around the Employment First law that was signed in 2014 that we talked about a little bit earlier. A lot of people don't realize that in, like, I think it's over half of the United States, people with disabilities are not required to get full minimum wage when they work. Alaska was actually the third state to require full minimum wage for everyone, even those with disabilities. So that was a huge plus for us and for our family members and for our students who have disabilities. So while this guide is focused on providing everyone with the opportunity for employment, it also contains many other helpful resources. So I just want to give you kind of an overview of what that looks like, and I'm going to have Lisa take over.
So as Anna mentioned, this is a very dense guide with a lot of information, and you can use it as early or as late as the student or adult with disabilities needs it. So it can be used as a linear handbook, or it can be just used as a resource guide. There's a ton of information in here. It gives very clear outlines for paths to meaningful employment based on interest and disability as well. And one thing to keep in mind is that we have what is called an ABLE account in Alaska, and it can be a savings account for a person with a disability that doesn't count against you or your medical SSI benefits. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well, but some of that information can be found. There are many programs and systems in place, so anybody with a disability can work. Disability Benefits 101 is a great resource, and a calculator that presents in plain language how working can impact your benefits and services. And this guide even shows you how to start your own business and tools to be successful if that is something you would like to do.
One of the things I like to point out is the micro enterprise, the self-employment resources, because there is actually a micro enterprise grant that you can apply for twice a year as a person with a disability to start your own business. And so if you don't have the capital, there are even financial resources in here too, to kind of come up with your own business. I know someone who did this, and she started out just doing like chickens with egg, selling her eggs. And now she has a booth at the weekly farmers market all summer long, and she has so many other items that she now sells based on that one, micro enterprise grant several years ago. So there's Transition Alaska. This was actually a effort between a couple of different agencies that came together during the pandemic. And it was really funny because before the pandemic, there weren't a ton of transition resources. And then during COVID, it's like everybody got together and was like, oh, okay. And now there are a ton of resources for secondary transition. If you Go ahead, Lisa. Sorry.
So this one of the things that happened is to kind of support the broader view of transition planning. A group of Alaska Native educators came together to write the Alaska Traditional Skills Curriculum. So it's specifically developed to improve quality of life, connection to local community, increase work-related skills for teens and young adults with disabilities who live in rural Alaska specifically. It provides tools teachers can use to incorporate traditional values and knowledge into the IEPs and transition plans. And it can be used as a guide to help teachers unfamiliar with the regions and the cultures where they teach to better understand Indigenous traditions and cultures and how these skills honor the unique ways of life of Alaska Native communities. This is a huge deal that this has come up, and this is something that is available. Many of the teachers, especially in rural areas, are coming from often the lower 48 to begin with, and it's their adventure to Alaska, and they come and they want to teach in the bush for a year or two. So this is a huge step in Alaska for our Alaska Natives as far as making sure that there is something that is there and consistent to help with these transition skills and curriculum. It is also, even though it is made for our more rural communities in Alaska, there is nothing saying that in our larger cities we cannot be using this. It's chocked full of fabulous information and when it comes to transition skills that are needed. So the National Center for College Students with Disabilities is the only federally funded national center in the US for college and graduate students with any type of disability, chronic health condition, mental or emotional illness. There is free information for parents, students, families, high schools that is available at NCCSD. And so I would encourage people to look into this and find out what they have to offer in your particular situation as your child gets older. So guardianship, many kids who are neurodiverse may require some level of support at the age of majority at 18 years old. So in Alaska, this can look like full or partial guardianship, conservatorship, power of attorney, or supported decision-making agreement. Guardian is a court appointed to protect the rights and manage the affairs. That can be a non-professional such as a family member or a professional appointed by the court versus a conservator who is a court appointed to manage the financial affairs of the person. So there are many, many different levels, different types of guardianship. Again, you have to determine what is best for your child. Do they only need financial guardianship? Do they only need help with their medical appointments? Do they only need help making basic life decisions throughout the day? And they can do pretty good when they are working with their finances. You have to look at each situation individually and determine what is best for your family and your situation, but know that there are multiple levels out there. The state did a revamp of their website, and the link at the bottom of the slide deck when you get it will take you there. It's extremely helpful and even has a helpline you can call with questions. Just know that it does take often about 6 months to achieve guardianship. So you do need to start early. You want guardianship in place if needed on the child's 18th birthday.
So WIPA is actually one of the resources it comes through the federal government, but there's like a house for it in each area. The house for ours is at UAA, and it stands for Work Incentives Planning and Assistance. And basically what it does is it helps beneficiaries, kiddos, and adults with disabilities to receive information that helps them do a successful transition to work. So they can actually talk to a counselor about their benefits like Medicaid, SSI, SSDI, and what would happen to those benefits if they were working, how many hours they were working, that kind of thing. And they do work in cooperation with federal, state, and private agencies that can kind of point them in different directions. They have different like calculators and stuff to kind of figure out how many hours you can work without losing your benefits, that kind of thing. So lots of very good help there, especially when we're talking about the finances. And we're kind of talking a little bit about the finances right now. Something to keep in mind is there's very strict rules on how much a person can make and still keep their services. And that's why we have things like DB 101 and WIPA. In Alaska, we have specific mechanisms for saving those that don't count against your benefits. One is called the ABLE account, which a person with a disability can use to build a reserve that doesn't count against them with their Medicaid or SSI benefits. And the other is a special needs trust. So the ABLE account is basically just gives them the opportunity to save without it counting against them. And then a trust is a resource trust established for the benefit of the disabled individual. And to just give you a better idea of what that looks like side by side, I have this cool graphic from Enable. And so basically there's like cost differences. Special needs trust can be costly to set up because you need to have a lawyer. The earnings are taxed. There's different levels when it comes to the benefits. The special needs trust can be spent pretty broadly. Like, if that person needs a house, if that person needs a car, it can be spent pretty broadly. Whereas the ABLE account funds must be used for the qualified disability. The account ownership is in a trust is owned by a family member, not the beneficiary. Whereas with the ABLE account, it is owned by the beneficiary. One of the big things that's important is if the person who is the beneficiary was to die, the funds remaining go to the estate or to probate. Whereas in the ABLE account, if the beneficiary was to pass away, any remaining funds in ABLE account can be taken by Medicaid to pay back any Medicaid services that person received. So there are some age eligibility things that are important to keep in mind. Right now, special needs trust, there's no restrictions on age of onset or type of disability. The ABLE account, so right now, individuals with disabilities have to have that disability by the time they're 26. That is right now. There was a law passed, I think it was last year, that will up that age to, I think, mid-40s. So the person has to have incurred the disability so that people who are a little bit older, who maybe get disabled older, in midlife or closer to it, still have access to these savings mechanisms. One thing to note is that you can have a trust in place and it can follow you. An ABLE account is state specific, and almost every state has their own plan. And the other thing too is that you can have both. So you can actually have, a special needs trust that like all the grandma and grandpa money goes into, and then an ABLE account that, like your daily living expenses go into. Jessica, it was a federal law that was passed. Excuse me. So I mentioned Disability 101. They actually recently re-upped and revamped their website as well. And now they have a fantastic section on youth and transition. And so they have all kinds of tools for health coverage, benefits, secondary transition. They have estimators. They have all the information you could possibly need on SSI, SSDI, finding health coverage after you age out, all of that kind of stuff. And so this is a great place as well to take a look. If you're trying to figure out, when your kiddo gets a little bit older, when he wants to start working, if he wants to start working, how is that going to impact him? And these have been around for a long time, so hopefully they'll be around for a little longer for when your kiddo gets older.
So we just wanted to leave you with a video and a graphic that sum up the process and why this is so important for our kiddos with disabilities. So you can see that the transition process has many, many different levels. It flows through in many different directions, all culminating in the end to something that is hopefully very great and propels your child towards a very good post-secondary experience.
Well, the first time I thought about transition, I'd gone to a lecture by Lou Brown from the University of Wisconsin. I thought he was some old farmer in his blue jeans and t-shirt, and I wondered why I was there. But he said something that, without him telling me this, I would never have transitioned. He said, every kid, no matter how severely impaired they are, there's something that they can do. And we must remember to help them to do it. So with that, I began looking for transitioning kinds of things. And the people from McGill were then beginning to look at person-centered plans. We didn't call them person-centered plans in those days. I don't remember what we did call them, but that wasn't person-centered plans, but it was the same thing, where you would sit down with a group of people who knew your child as well, and you would look at what their needs were, where they were today, and where their hopes and dreams would be in tomorrow. Because you have to know where you're going in order to take the steps to get there. If you're going nowhere, you don't have to transition. But if you're going to live in the community, work in the community, be a part of the community, we have to figure out a way to make that happen. Without a transition plan, I mean a real plan, not a piece of paper with words on it, but a real plan that helps you know where to go, what skills your child will need, what their desires are, not so much what yours are, but what their desires are. You're never going to transition into the community. It doesn't work without it.
So thank you very much for coming, everybody, today. We are going to go ahead and sign off. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either Anna or myself. We are more than happy to help you. There are tons of resources and references attached. Again, you will get the slide deck next week. At some point, it will come out. And as always, if there's anything that we can do to help, please let us know. We are here to support you.